So, like I was saying, the death of Queen Elizabeth II, I think, has revealed something that was otherwise buried. We were talking before the podcast, just before this, about the kind of national sentiment in Britain that forms this kind of substratum of what Peter Hitchens calls the sort of deep magic of the country that holds it all together. And suddenly it's like a bunch of chains on the bottom of the ocean, right? And over years they get covered with silt, but then when they get pulled, they just come straight back up and taut, and all the silt falls off and you can see them again. And that's how I feel about this. Like, suddenly it's like the sinews of this sentiment are suddenly revealed. And so all of the leftists whining and nagging, it all just like, no one cares. You know, it all feels that there are no teeth to it anymore. Because everyone's like, no. We're talking about, like, you know, the pillars of the earth here. We're talking about the genuine thing that makes this country work as it does. And the death of Queen Elizabeth has been impactful. There's a danger here, as in we have to do the right thing in order to make sure that in a year's time you can still be sat in a nice comfortable office whining about racism or whatever it is you want to whine about, leftists. And so it shows that they are deeply reliant on this kind of deep magic. And I think that this is a good time to compare it to a superficial magic, which I did a premium video on lotus.com called The Secrets of Rousseau. Now this, I think, is honestly, I'm glad I did this, not realizing how relevant this would become, because Edmund Burke said that he had spoken to David Hume, who had spoken to Rousseau about how, because Rousseau had to flee to England, because everyone has to flee to England, about how to wow the public. And Rousseau was basically like, well, you need marvels, you need novelty. And it's like, yeah, okay, you do that, and that is a kind of, you know, magic, but that's a very superficial kind of magic. You know, there's not much longevity to novelty. And this, I think, is easily contrasted against the sort of deep magic of tradition that we're seeing at the moment, when everyone suddenly knows what to do. You know, everyone suddenly falls in line and does the right thing. And watching it, I've been watching it for the past few days, just like the live streams of people queuing to see the Queen laying in state, and it's just amazing how the way everyone realizes, oh no, there's a way things are supposed to be, and I'm going to be that way. In fact, let's go and have a look at the queue. In fact, so this is the British queue tracker for the Queen lying in state, which is something we have. This was taken a couple of days ago when the queue was 3.5 miles long, but there is a live queue tracker on YouTube, which, as you can see, has been paused at the moment because it got to over 5 miles and 14 hours wait to see the Queen in state. And so they've paused the queue. Now, I didn't realize you could pause a queue. Like, I
know you can jump a queue.
Yeah, you can. Well, rude people can try and jump a queue, but no true Brit would jump a queue. And I've heard no reports of queue jumping to see the Queen, which is good. But yeah, so this queue got to the point of capacity being reached, apparently. If you go to the next one, after this one, just because like things have happened since I put this all together. If you go to the next one, the capacity was reached, and so they've asked people for at least 6 hours not to join the queue as it's at full capacity. We are sorry for any inconvenience. Please do not attempt to join the queue until it reopens. Okay, well, there we go. For the Department for Digital Culture and Media and Sport have said, which is fine. And so I loathe to feature someone like Tom Harwood on the channel, but he was standing outside talking to people in the queue, and I thought it was just very interesting why people were there, you know, and what their reason for spending 14 hours maximum for the queue was. So let's watch this first clip.
How long have you been queuing today?
Oh, since 7 a.m.
And did you always know that you'd need to come and see the Queen lying in state?
Absolutely, yeah. It was just, wasn't even a question. Just had to come, absolutely.
A feeling of compulsion almost?
Yeah, literally felt compelled. Just got to come and pay our respects and say goodbye, basically.
See, I think that's interesting. Literally felt compelled. And I can really see it. There is some sort of compulsive force, and this is what I'm talking about. When it was Peter Hitchens who coined the term "the deep magic of England," I think. But like, I think that's what she's talking about. Like, there's just this unknown, unseen, but compelling force that's like, no, I have to. I have to go and do this.
I think we've been told for that long that Britishness doesn't exist, that no one's patriotic, that it's a dirty word. And it's taken something like this to remind people that it's not. It's a bit like you don't tell, well, I'm presuming you don't tell your mum and your family that you love them every day.
Well, I don't have to.
No, because you know you do. Yeah. And we're not an overly emotional people, even though we have all the emotions everybody else does. But it takes something like this for us to go, I am British and I do love this country. I am proud of this country. And because of this, those chains you talked about at the bottom of the ocean with the sediment, now they've become clear again because people have been rattling them because they're British.
Yeah. And the Sky put out an article of just featuring people's outfits, which I thought was nice. If we can scroll down, you can see lots of Britishness. And you can scroll down, John, in this. You see, just lots and lots of Union Jack suits and things like that. And that's just lovely, isn't it? I think that's wonderful. But what's interesting as well is that we've been queuing like this along the Thames when people are in state for generations, actually. I didn't realise how old a tradition this was. This, as you can see from previous eras, has been going on for quite some time. If you can scroll down, I think there's... they've got Queen Mother, Winston Churchill, keep going, Winston Churchill, Queen Mary, and then, King George, but they've got go down to the bottom, keep going, Edward... and William Gladstone, that was it, in 1898. So, again, hundreds of thousands of people go through Westminster Abbey Hall. And so I just think that's important, isn't it? It's all,
tradition.
Yeah, it all ties together. We've been doing this for a long time. And so the royal family put out a picture of Queen Elizabeth's, is it a casket? I suppose it's the picture of her lying in state. And I've been watching this. This is before people were allowed in and filing past, but you can see the setup there. And I've been watching this just as I've been, just working. I've had it in the background, and it's been fascinating watching people walk in, because as Callum said, he saw the first ones go in, and the first couple of people just kind of nodded to her, and then everyone afterwards did that. And I don't think that's part of the tradition or a requirement. It's just that nobody doesn't know not to do it. And
doesn't want to be rude.
And doesn't want to be rude, doesn't want to be out of place, And I've been watching the changing of the guard, which is fascinating, because you've got 8 guardsmen or something. They march in a column, take up the positions behind the existing guardsmen, who then, upon a given signal, march off, and then the other guys just step forward into their place. And so these guys are basically always at the same thing. It's like some sort of 19th century German clock. But with real people in, their proper dress. And you can compare this to, again, earlier times where, in 1936, a chap painted King George lying in state. You can get to the next one, John. You can get this one up just so people can see it. Again, it's no different. It's just the same. And it's been the same for a long time. In fact, this, as I said, is in Westminster Abbey. This is an ancient building. The building itself, Westminster Hall, the building itself was built in 1097 by William II. It's William the Conqueror's son, I think. And so the building itself is nearly 1,000 years old. And the roof, the timber roof, was built in 1393. So you can see the scope of this over time. The
tentacles of this go back so far.
Oh God, it's just so deep into the history of this country. Again, just you can't describe it in modern terms. This was built when people thought God invested the monarch, and we were a feudal country. It's so old. But anyway, so carrying on with the way people look at this, then this all gives the effect of magic, which is, I think, right. This is Lieutenant Colonel Graham Jones talking about how he was part of the brass band rehearsing for the Queen Mother's funeral, which was obviously a decade ago now or something like that. But let's play this clip, because again, the way he describes it, I think, is just fascinating.
I remember doing the rehearsal for the Queen Mother's funeral, and it's actually quite surreal because it's dark, and you're going through the streets. Now remember the carriages; they all had lights on, the candle lights, and it was just sort of strangely magical, but just very humbling to be actually a part of it.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's the term magical just keep getting brought up. And as you were saying, it shows that actually, we are okay to say that we like this country, actually.
Yep.
It's one of those things that people don't generally say, but I think is important. I mean, this was from GB News, where, again, this one of their presenters had been in the queue for like 5 hours, and she was just giving her experience. And I thought it'd be interesting to watch.
And what was it like in the queue? Because I've heard all these stories of people coming out and they seem to have just made friends and are holding hands, total strangers. I mean, what was your experience like?
Yeah, I feel quite emotional thinking about it now, because you go in and it's just the most British way of behaving. We all know what to do. We were all in single file immediately at 5:25 this morning. We're all walking along at a good pace, and almost immediately you start talking to the people in front of you and behind you, and really, by the time it took me 5 hours to do the entire queue, and there was a lady from Australia there, a married couple from South London, there was a boy from Clapham, and myself, and we all came together. We were sharing our biscuits, we were sharing stories. We felt like friends, and I joked as we came into Westminster Garden here that I felt like we were a bit of a family, and it did feel like that. But there was a sense of camaraderie and friendship, and it was wonderful. It was a really, really nice experience.
When was the last time we felt this way?
It's almost been illegal to feel this way for a very long time.
Yeah, and it's hard to find where you would get such a narrative on TV these days, right? You would never be able to talk about this, because we'd have to talk about, some minority is being oppressed because whatever reasons and blah blah blah, and that's all we get to talk about these days. And so this is just a real breath of fresh air, and there's a genuine depth of feeling here, which
I don't think the people who are queuing up could actually explain really why they're there or why they felt compelled to turn up. And it's not because an old woman's died. It's not because a queen died. It's because the old era is gone, and we're now entered a new era. So it's a loss, but it's not loss of the queen. It's a loss of what we had before, because things have changed now. We now have a king, and it's how we feel about the country. Something dramatically has changed our country, and it's about acknowledging that and showing respect for that.
I think there's also an aspect of maintaining the continuum, though, as in you're going to go and see the guards standing there by Queen Elizabeth laying in state. Well, that's the same as what your grandparents would have done and their grandparents would have done, and so it's also, things change, but in some way they also stay the same.
And I think it's them supporting that.
Yeah.
Because that's our system.
Yes. Pete Hitchens had a great take on this. Let's listen.
Also, I think over the past 50 or 60 years, attitudes towards death and mourning and funerals have changed completely. And go to a funeral now, and you're quite likely to hear jokes being told at the event, which is unthinkable in my
and people
childhood.
not really wearing black necessarily.
Very little of that. All the traditions of mourning have weakened immensely. And I try. What do you do if you're standing in the street when a hearse goes by? People no longer wear hats; they can't take them off, and quite often it's as if something is passing which is quite irrelevant. Whereas, again, 30 or 40 years ago, people would at least have stood in silence by the road,
with a bowed head, possibly.
But for anybody, not just and all these traditions have weakened along with the religious tradition in the country. People in many cases don't. They may feel inwardly that they wish to show some sort of regret, but they haven't got any customs that they've learnt from childhood by which they can do it. Which to me is a loss. I think it's a great shame that we have so much less ceremony in our
Well, that was why I found it rather sort of comforting in a way to watch that rather obscure sort of procedure that went on over the weekend, the accession.
Oh, these things are wonderful.
I mean, of course, I'd never seen it because nobody had seen it.
No one has seen it.
But I found it quite. I couldn't take my eyes off it.
No, these things are marvelous. They remind us of the deep magic underneath the whole very, very ancient country.
Yeah.
Which I think is just exactly right. We are definitely losing something if we allow these traditions to wither. Yeah. We are tangibly losing something, even though you couldn't quantify it. it's definitely there. Historian Tom Holland, I think, had a very nice and modern way of putting it. If you can scroll up on this one, John, just so you see the one above it. So Dr. Paul Johnson here saying, in the eyes of the world, we are possibly appropriately and certainly stereotypically being defined by Q. And Tom Holland said, yes, I'm so proud of this. And I agree. Because it speaks a lot, as he replies with this picture, to the British character, which can be summed up with patience.
And fair play. You take your place in the line, and that's your place. You do not try to take someone else's place. And it's a sense of fair play.
First come, first serve. It's exactly it. And so you can look at the response to this from, say, Owen Jones, who's not one of my favourite leftists, but he says, with Queen Elizabeth gone, the monarchy's magic may be fading. And I don't think that's true. I think it's the complete opposite. I've been quite surprised at the outpouring and the public engagement in this. It's been more than I thought it was going to be. Yeah, me too. I'm genuinely impressed, actually. Which, again, just seems to be the sort of, the leftist, the communist perspective, the materialist perspective. Well, maybe the magic's fading. It's like, well, maybe you're wishful thinking there, Owen. You know, if anything, it looks like the magic's surprisingly strong. Yeah. And you get other people who, again, I can't help but notice this guy's a foreigner because of the next one. Like Amar Rahman. He's like, you have to wonder what Western media would say if people in the global south suddenly started piling up sandwiches and soft toys as some bizarro shrine for a dead monarch. And it's like, well, I mean, in Britain, I don't think we'd find that too terribly bizarre. Because it's sort of weird rituals we do. Well,
to answer that, in Red Square in Moscow and in Vietnam. So in Moscow, I queued up and visited Lenin, frozen in his tomb. Yep. And when I was in Vietnam, I visited Ho Chi Minh, frozen in his tomb. That's exactly what we're doing here.
Yep. But I mean, it's not like people in the global south, don't they have their own strange traditions and rituals? I mean, my favourite one, I think, is probably the Prince Philip movement, which is actually hilarious. We can go to the next one, John. The Prince Philip movement is an indigenous religious sect from Papua New Guinea. I think it is a cargo cult, and they happen to have loved Prince Philip. And the Wikipedia article on this is just fantastic, right? They say this. In April 2021, the sect mourned Prince Philip's death. Village Chief Albi said that he was terribly, terribly sorry that he died, and the tribal leader, Chief Yappa, sent his condolences to the royal family and the people of the UK. The Union flag was flown at half-mast on the grounds of Nakamal. A formal mourning period was declared, and many tribespeople gathered in a ceremony to remember the Duke, where men took turns to speak and pay tribute to him. For the next few weeks, villagers met periodically to conduct rites for him, whom they see as a recycled descendant of a very powerful spirit or god that lives on one of their mountains. They conducted a ritualistic dance, held a procession, displayed memorabilia for the Duke, while the men drank kava, a ceremonial drink made from the roots of the kava plant. The period of mourning culminated in a significant gathering where a great deal of yams and kava plants were on display. Numerous pigs were killed for the ceremony. Referring to the Queen, Chief Jack Malia said that though the Duke is dead, they still have a connection with the mother of the royal family. Many of the tribespeople believe that while his body lies at rest, the Duke's soul will return to its spiritual home, the island of Tanna. So that's the kind of thing that people in the global south might think. And what do? Well, we don't disrespect it. Because at the end of the day, you know, they might not be our traditions, but they're their traditions, and, you know, we leave them to them.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the premium hangouts we do with premium members on Europe's only indigenous people. Only the Sami, trust me. If you want to follow what else we're putting out, you can follow me on Getter at Callum on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.